Hello and welcome everybody to the Raptors Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Samson Folk, and today we're talking about some really fun storylines from the season that was and heading into the summer, next season, all that kind of stuff. But to do it with me is a host over at the Locked On Podcast Sports Network. Okay, he talks about all kinds of stuff on all types of days, but he also does play-by-play for the CEBL, and in J. Cole's letter written to the CEBL, indicated that he wanted his games called by Sean Woodley. Said his voice was audible chocolate. And so, Sean, how the hell you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. As it turns out, I think I am calling the first game that he's scheduled to play in next week. So he got his wish. I'm glad for him.
Do you
Not
have
sure
any?
anyone else wants it, but I'm sure to work in some sort of very cringy lyrical reference at some point over the course of a 2-hour broadcast. I'm sure.
Will you give us a hint?
No, I have to listen to J. Cole first is the thing. I don't like it would be nice if like a punk band frontman would join the league, because then that would be a lot easier for me. But I know I had a friend who I drove around with a lot in like second year university who listened to a lot of J. Cole. Gonna have to dig back into that catalog because I have not dusted it off ever since.
Okay. Well, I think that's cool. Isn't that weird how celebrity works? Like you just, all of a sudden you're calling J. Cole in a game, like as if it were the NBA All-Star game or something.
I'm really stressed out about what I call him on, because most people just refer to people as like the last name, right? It's Barnes, right. It's Siakam. Do I just say it's Cole? Is it Jay? Is it? I'm stressing out about it big time. I'm going to need the pronunciation guide to be very detailed before I start that game on Thursday.
There's an ongoing meme that you would refer to him as Jermaine, and then you wait a beat, and then Cole. And so that's apparently what it's supposed to be. But okay, we're talking storylines for the Raptors and all the things that come along with it. It's been a hell of a year, chock full of storylines and chock full of successes. And we're here to talk about it. So, Sean, your favorite storyline from this past season. Let's hear it, and then let's talk about it.
Well, for anyone who's heard us podcast together before this year, I don't think it's going to be a huge surprise, but like watching Pascal Siakam do what he did and become the all-NBA caliber player that we kind of knew he was, but like kind of a souped up and better version of it, that was really, really satisfying. I know you were on the sort of believe in Pascal kind of train for the entirety of his sort of dip in his career, right? From the bubble on through last season. And we've talked at length about how, the Tampa season wasn't actually as bad as people painted it to be and all that. And it was really cool to see him just kind of shake off all of the bullshit and be a fantastic basketball player for everyone to see again. And it was just, the evolution as the season went along, I thought was really cool, as he kind of got his feet wet in December thereabouts. And then kind of January comes around. He has that massive game, I think December 28th against the Sixers. That to me is sort of like the pivot point of the season. He comes back from COVID. And from then on out, he's just one of the 12 or 13 best players alive. And the Raptors win a million games as a result. And I'm a sucker for a redemptive arc. I'm a sucker for dudes who get dumped on and kind of emerge from it. This is the reason I'm a fan of Karl Anthony Towns. It's a reason, frankly, I like Kyle Lowry so much, right? Like guys who sort of are obviously very good, but because of the take industrial complex kind of get dirt shoveled on their careers way prematurely, kind of rising up and sort of dusting off that thin layer of lazily tossed upon dirt to recapture their former glory and, in fact, expand upon it. Like that kicked ass. I was so happy to watch Pascal kind of have the joy return to his game. And, all of the stuff about him and Nick Nurse's little tiffs totally well in the rear view. Anything to do with, are they going to trade Pascal? Like the most wonderful thing is that this offseason, outside of some yahoos, is going to be free of, are they going to trade Pascal conversation? Like, obviously not. He is very clearly the best player they have. You don't just go and trade the best player you have to get depth or whatever the hell people want to do. And I just think it's really satisfying. It was so fun to watch, especially as a guy who's always been a Siakam dude, right? And I'm very happy and really excited to see where it goes next.
Okay, so I'm gonna try and paint a timeline.
Yeah.
Insert anything, interject wherever you see fit. So, bubble, right? COVID happens. He is later voted as, second team All NBA.
Yep.
He was recognized as a better forward that year than guys like Jason Tatum. He was really remarkable. And so the bubble comes. He struggles with his handle. He struggles to create separation. He struggles to finish, and he struggles with his jump shot. Basically, a lot of the things that are, skill based and touch based in his game after a long time off, where he tried to get out of Canada to go to the States, but couldn't. He tried to find places he could work out, but couldn't. We end up with that in the bubble. He struggles immensely on offense, still provides really great value on defense. But
people forget that he was a monster in that Celtics series defensively. The whole team was, but like they were playing with Norm Powell at the 3 a lot of the time, and he was covering up for so much. Like he was incredible. Very, very slept on. It's like kind of a baseline of value that he always has because of that defense.
Yeah, I'm glad you did, because that is something I always like to add when people talk about the bubble. It's like, well, he was one of the 5 best defenders through the 2 rounds of the playoffs, which is no small thing. It's kind of reserved for, being bad on offense and then being like exceptional on defense is kind of like a Draymond role. And Pascal is supposed to be, well past that and has now ascended to that point. But so he leaves the bubble. Really, the media around it and a lot of the fan base around it is pretty vitriolic, not in a good place. Tampa, we get to Tampa, and he's Durag P. He has he's signed with Red Bull. He's putting out the Pascal propaganda, which is now, I guess, kind of a noteworthy Twitter account that has developed on Raptors Twitter. But this was the actual act of propaganda. And good stuff too. I enjoyed his little film series and stuff like that. But he enters a season where he's mostly working on playmaking, is playing with a much less potent version of Kyle Lowry, and no Kawhi Leonard, like nothing like that. And Fred is also
a lot of Stanley Johnson.
A lot of Stanley Johnson. Yeah. Aaron Baines is his front court partner. And so this is where he finally learns that like space is no longer his ally, because he's not aligned with it, let's say. And so he develops a lot as far as playmaking. He has a very public beef with Nick Nurse, wherein he got suspended for 1 game for conduct detrimental to the team, I believe. That was blown up in quite a few media circles. It led to a lot of speculation that he would be traded. Then he injures his shoulder. He gets surgery. The whole summer, he is put in trade packages by fans and then by analysts and then by rumor makers. He gets aggregated a bunch as if he were fodder for moving up in the draft, as if they want to move him for certain players. And then we come to this season. He starts late. The Raptors go on a 5-game winning streak against like Indiana and New York. It starts to bubble up that maybe this team is, fine without Pascal. He comes back. The defense tanks. Those voices get louder. And then eventually, as you said, December 28th, I think he finds his stride. Post-COVID, he goes on a streak of playing like 40 minutes per game, playing phenomenal defense, averaging like 23, like 8 and 5, and probably solidified himself at a spot on an all NBA team. And here we are. Is that like the proper timeline?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good summation. I mean, I think, the beginning of it is also interesting to point out because, like, the last game he played before the shutdown in Utah was, like, one of the best games he played that entire All-NBA season, right? And it's just, like, seeing the precipitous drop-off from that peak where they go in and, like, have that they beat the Jazz in that game, right? It was, like, a pretty inspiring win. I think he had, like, 28 and maybe, like, 8 assists or something like that. I'm probably misquoting it, but he was really good. It was one of his better playmaking games. And then to see, like, the next version of him being the one who can't post up Jaylen Brown to save his life, but kept on doing it over and over in that second round, like, yeah, it was a bummer, man. But, yeah, I think you kind of laid it out pretty well. I forgot though how people were still like, "Who's he even good?" at the start of this season. That bums me out. I forgot that was a thing. I remember like there was like a clear line of demarcation on that December 28th, especially like doing my podcast like on YouTube. Like the YouTube comments flipped forever after that 28th. Like there were still people like after a loss, be like, Siakam sucks, trade him, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, I don't need to read these comments. This is YouTube, but you know, shout out to the lovely YouTube people watching this video. I'm talking about my channel. But yeah, it was, I totally forgot that it was so vitriolic at the start of this season, even as well. Like very angsty, man. I'm glad that the angst around Siakam has now gone away, because like he's the least angsty dude in the world. Just to look at him smile and just kind of play basketball. Like there's no angst about that guy at all. Yet it seemed to be the only emotion that was engendered by his existence for a little while there.
It introduces a very interesting conversation that we won't get too far into, but I just want to like brush the top of, is that on the one hand, Pascal Siakam with this season also came, I think, like an immense amount of grace and wisdom, wherein every post game, played good or bad, the questions good or bad, his response was always that he didn't really care if you thought he was the best player in the world. He didn't care if he thought, or if you thought he was the worst player in the world. He just was himself, and he was trying to play for his teammates and his loved ones. And he eventually achieved, I think, the best season of his career. But within that, it's a really interesting conversation, because early on in the year, in November, I believe, Lewis and I did that Minute Basketball episode where we said in defense of Pascal Siakam, because the dialogue was, as you said, like, or as we both said, like vitriolic. And, you know, on the one hand, as podcasters, as people who work in the space, you see the dialogue online. And especially in a world that's post-COVID now, maybe we'll see it out in the world more often. But it's really interesting to say, like, Twitter doesn't matter, because it doesn't. But it is also the largest marketplace for sharing of sports opinions. So, like,
it's the only place to check the pulse, right? Like,
right. Yeah. So, be it a player, be it somebody who covers the league, I've always found it, or have found it increasingly interesting, whether you should pay heed, because it is the pulse, but it's also a pulse that is exacerbated in vitriol, because it is a lot of times anonymous. So it's not like everybody at the bar scene or whatever. It's just like, I've always found that very, very interesting. And Pascal, because he doesn't have to be on social media, at least not in the way that, you know, you would be, he's just kind of done away with that. And I think, you know, a huge credit to him for doing so.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like that checking the pulse thing, it's sort of like I need to check two different, like I gotta check the wrist and the neck when it comes to like, is this actually a way people feel? And like the one is like Twitter, YouTube comments, whatever, like the online space. And the other one is like the people in my life who are big Raptors fans, who are maybe not quite as like absorbed in it all as I am. Like I had an uncle, for example, who just really did not like Kyle Lowry and really thought that, like, this was before obviously the turnaround. I laughed at him all the time that we had this conversation once, but you know, and I'll have like other, you know, family members who I'll be like, yeah, what do you think about Siakam? Like, where are you at? And like, if the people who I know watch the team and like are, you know, kind of, you know, in the loop and are not like overreactionaries, are down on a guy or in on a guy, like I kind of know, like if it doesn't match what like the online discourse is, I'll kind of leave it. Oh, well, that's the online thing. No one really cares about that. But like if it lines up where both my cousin who loves the Raptors is like sick of a guy and online is also sick of a guy, then I'm like, okay, maybe there's some legs to this. Maybe I need to have more of a sample than just my cousin and online. But like, you know, it's kind of the best you can do, right? But yeah, it's with Siakam. I thankfully found that most people who I talk to like day to day about Siakam were a little bit less angsty than sort of like the online discourse, which is encouraging for sure. I didn't have like, you know, my same Kyle Lowry disliking uncle was not like, get rid of Pascal now. Like I think most people kind of understood that like the couple of years he went through were miserable, man. Like the Michael Grange piece, I thought did a really good job illuminating that came out, I think, near the end of the season, right? And hopefully people have more of a bit of understanding of the context behind why he struggled so badly in the bubble. And if you isolate the bubble out as this weird outlier and you look at the Tampa season as its own thing, that where, again, he played better than you give him credit for, that anyone really gives him credit for. That's where his playmaking seeds were first planted. And you also look at all the circumstance around it and the roster they had on hand and the COVID absences and the fact that the back part of the season became garbage time by necessity, where no one was really playing games or anything like that. I think reasonable people can look at the sort of overall sort of scope of Pascal's career and realize, oh, like, yeah, there was a year and a half dip there, but for like obvious and totally understandable reasons. So hopefully that stuff's all behind. I'm sure, the next time Siakam comes into a game and has a couple bad games in a row next year, it'll start back up again because that's the way it works. But I think for reasonable people, there's hopefully some understanding of the context behind the dip in his career and sort of an understanding that he's left that behind big time now.
Mm-hmm. It's you and I have a similar process for checking the pulse. And I remember last summer I got a lot of questions about for like, I have an uncle as well who asked me about Pascal Siakam, and one of the first questions he asked was about Siakam not getting along with Nick Nurse.
Right.
And that makes you think that, like, if somebody who pays attention to the NBA but isn't, keeping up on everything is asking those questions, then I think you can surmise that that is where the dialogue is, not only by fans, but by media as well.
Totally.
And that's where I was kind of like, okay, there's a lot of, the periphery is dominating the prevailing thoughts on Pascal Siakam. It's not about like, oh wow, what a really fun playmaking season, like this guy.
Yeah.
and like, he's pulling up from different places on the floor and quite a few things in his game are changing, but it was more so about like the stuff that was going on outside of it. And so I thought that was really interesting to now, part of the conversation is, yes, he's changed the conversation outside of it, but most of it is just that he's an all NBA player on the court, as you said, for an elongated stretch, like a top 12 or top 13 player, which rules, kicks ass, frankly.
I really wonder, like, the thing that really I thought sort of hurt the discourse around him during the Tampa season was like the 3 or 4 missed game winners. And like, if 2 of those go down, are we even talking about this being like a substandard year for him? Like, people gravitate to those big flashpoint moments, right? And maybe people who didn't watch the whole season for the Raptors and just caught those crunch time moments, or were watching the game on League Pass because it was close and saw him miss those shots, like, that probably warps the perception as well. But like, I can't think of a stupider thing to frame your opinion of a guy on than literally one shot samples at the end of games. It never, and like a lot of them just like rimmed out and were like great process and bad luck. And I just, if he goes 2 of 4 in those situations as opposed to 0 of 4, I wonder how different the sort of general tone and tenor coming out of last season is.
Everybody and you know what? You can make the argument that those 2 losses or those 4 losses, that's Scotty Barnes, baby.
It is Scotty Barnes, baby.
Pascal was in on it from the jump, dude. He saw the vision.
Yeah. The greatest champion of Vision 6'9" there ever was.
Yep. But the avatar of it and, the purveyor of the process that brought it there, apparently. Sean, any other storylines from this season that you'd like to hit on?
I mean, it's like a big one, sort of not a specific guy, but like, it was fun as hell to watch this weird ass team play basketball, man. Like, they played weird ball, and it didn't make a lot of sense a lot of the time. It was new, it was novel, and it rocked. And like, you can quibble with how sustainable it is if you're talking like championship picture and, are they going to be able to win more than 48 games with it? Did they have to exert every ounce of effort they had to win those 48 games? Yeah, probably. Is that sustainable? Probably not. But it was a really interesting experiment that I think in many ways worked and kind of validated the decision to go ahead with the experiment. Obviously, not everything went perfectly, and there's some touch-ups that'll have to be made to the roster going forward. But watching them play those lineups with only 6'9" dudes was super cool. Who's the point guard? Thad Young. Who's the shooting guard? Let's say Chris Boucher. Like, it was just like, I love when basketball is different and weird. One of my favorite teams of all time is the Grit and Grind Grizzlies, because they didn't play like anybody else. They just played like, yeah, we're just going to play the way we want to. It's maybe not like the most aesthetically pleasing at times, but it gets the job done, and no one else can match what we do. I like it when teams kind of buck tradition and say, hey, what if this thing worked? And, again, I think jury's still out on how effective it can be over the course of a full season. And, if you have championship aspirations, but obviously they won a lot of games and they were pretty entertaining doing it. So run it back, more 6-9. I'm cool with that. Like that was just, to me, all season long. I found myself just so interested in talking about the team because what they were doing was fun and new. And it wasn't like, all right, let's just run more high pick and roll. That's fine. There's a place for that. It works. But like with the team I'm watching every single day, throw some curveballs at me, man. Like make me feel uncomfortable. And, ultimately I felt very comfortable by the end of the season because they won a whole lot of games.
I forgot a moment on the Pascal timeline. At his lowest point during this season for the fan base, Scotty Barnes inexplicably starts posting incessantly about how Pascal is his favorite player. Weird, fun thing. But anyway, yeah, you're absolutely right. Is that how interesting is it that the Raptors, at least for regular season basketball, found a change of pace lineup that kind of gamed the system.
Mm-hmm.
They rebounded over 40% of their own misses. They really, really gummed up passing lanes and driving lanes for the opposing teams. And they had this really nasty, ugly offensive process that worked. They just won heaps of minutes playing without a point guard. And obviously that leaned heavily on Pascal Siakam's creation, but it also leaned on the, incorrigible status of the Raptors' offensive rebounding and their ability to kind of track down turnovers on the defensive end and to rotate back towards the rim, that democratic rim protection that they go after. And I don't think they had like a ton of success with that in the playoffs, and it's tougher to bottle that type of process. Especially since teams can kind of lay off of shooters and you can leave your base defensive packages. But finding that in the regular season, maybe that's really meaningful for, winning regular season games going forward. That's kind of like San Antonio. They didn't win the title every year. And, the Raptors are not title bound or anything, but they found a way and they found lineups and styles that drove them to the upper echelon of the playoffs so that they were a higher seed and had home court advantage. And they kind of started the advent of what's the term? Load management, right?
Yeah.
The Raptors really it took off with them because of Kawhi, but it was, the Spurs were doing it with like Tim and Manu and Tony for however long. So yeah, finding something like that, I think, is one of the most intriguing things that the Raptors could have done. It's going to be awesome to see if they can continue that into next season. And as you said, and as I think in January, we did a podcast on your channel where we were just talking about like, find the weird stuff. And as fans, what more could you want? Because everybody wants a championship, but you want a product. You want a unique style of play, and you want something that you can identify with. And this gritty, long, weirdo basketball that the Raptors have played is something that many people kind of clung on to for good and for bad. Some people are like, I can't believe they do this version of this, but it was something that was unique to them. And that is one of the best storylines for sure.
And like tied into all of this too, I am someone who, I kind of take a, the championship is not all I'm looking for type of approach when I'm watching basketball. I think I like the regular season more than the playoffs, actually. I find the playoffs to be very angsty, to bring that word back up. And sometimes it makes it not super fun to watch. I'm probably on an island with that. I know it's not like a very common take. People love the playoffs, and I do like the playoffs. I get down for a great series. That Celtics-Bucks series was awesome. Wish the Bucks had won it because I'm sick of the Celtics, but that's just my own personal biases coming into play. But I don't think we do enough in terms of appreciating the regular season and giving it up for teams that make the regular season interesting, right? Because there's so many teams where it's like, oh yeah, well, the regular season is just like this thing we have to do before the playoffs happen. And the Raptors went full bore. They fully exerted themselves. And I thought Masai had a really interesting quote kind of around the deadline, I want to say it was one of his availabilities he did. I think it was when he was announcing the Thad Young trade or something, where, you know, he was asked about the heavy minutes for guys. And yeah, Fred VanVleet played a lot of minutes and Pascal played a lot of minutes. And, you know, you could maybe attribute Fred's late season breakdown to exactly that. Not maybe, almost certainly. But, you know, Masai said, like, you know, we're not going to go win a championship this year. Like, this is the time to go and, you know, get reps and play in intense games and get crunch time experience. And like, that was awesome. I was glad that they tried so hard to win these games. And I'm not someone who really quibbles over minutes when you're not in a championship window, right? Like, I was fine seeing them run those guys out as much as they did because it lent to really exciting regular season basketball. They made regular season games super exciting and fun to watch. There were very few games. Like, I was kind of keeping a running tally for the first half of the season, you know, as to like, okay, what their actual record is versus the was it fun to watch the game record. And honestly, the record this season and was it fun to watch the game was like 72-10. Like, to me, that is all I'm looking for. We spend 6 months of our lives every year watching regular season basketball and yet are so quick to shoo away its importance once the playoffs come around. And I think that's just such a silly, backwards way of thinking because it informs everything that happens in the playoffs, number one, but it doesn't have to be about what it's informing that particular season either, right? Like, it can be informing what comes the year after, 2 years down the road. And I just give it up for regular season ball. The Raptors made the regular season super intriguing this season. And, you know, I think they do a pretty good job of that generally because they tend to overshoot expectations. And usually expectation is kind of tied to your enjoyment of things. But I thought this season in particular, the fact that they just seemed to give a shit about winning regular season games was kind of like a fun and novel concept, just as novel as their 6-9 lineups, right? Like, it's not something you see across the board in the NBA. You got, you know, teams are not going to send their guys over the border because it's too much of a pain in the ass and it's just a regular season game. I thought they just really made watching every game as fun as they possibly could because they tried and they wanted to win games. And to me, like, that is as much as you can ask for from the thing that you're investing so much time in as a fan or as a viewer, as whatever. That's all I really want is entertain me, please. Don't just like treat this 82 game swath of games as though it's some sort of inconvenience on the road to the thing that actually matters.
You and I are definitely in the same boat as far as it pertains to enjoying the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. I get it when the quality of play, maybe the front end of April, I guess, back end of March, when teams, if you don't have a fun young player who's trying a bunch of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it gets bogged down. Maybe you don't enjoy that much. And maybe you like competitive, really hard fought games. You can get that in the regular season, but with quite a few teams, not towards the end. But I think that in an entertainment conglomerate, why we would do away with, like, what is it, 5 or 6 months of basketball that, you know, packaged in that is all the highlights, is all the different plays and all that kind of stuff, is like, basketball is and isn't a highlight sport because you can be excited about a great many things that won't show up on the highlight reel, but you also remember the game through, like, oh yeah, these highlights, these inflection points or whatever. But sometimes I think people are too focused on who they predicted to win the championship. Sometimes I think they're too focused on picking out quote unquote frauds and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, they're out there playing basketball, man. Like, they're on the court and it's televised to be on your screen. Like, you're not supposed to find the end result and be like, I was correct. Like, especially since most people are bad at analysis, they just like, they want to stamp like, hey, I said this, by the way. I said that one of the 30 teams was a fraud and they weren't the one of 30 who won. So I enjoy basketball this year. Like
it's like putting in a cheat code into a video game to like get yourself to the end without actually playing the thing. Like, what's the joy in that? Like, oh, cool, you won the game. Great, good job. Rolled credits. Woohoo.
Yeah, go enjoy the hoops. And as you said, 72-10. As far as fun hoops go, the Raptors were the 96 Bulls of this season.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. Just playing fun basketball, doing something is really great. But we're going to get into the summer storylines, the off-season storylines and all that kind of stuff after this ad read. So get ready, listener, get ready, viewer, for a message from our friends over at Jack Health. So, you want to get to the top of your game? Jack Health at www.jack.health is an online service for men's health that handles the doctor's appointment, the prescription, and the shipping, which, by the way, is free. All you need to do is stay home and relax. They've got stuff for sexual health, daily health, hair and skin, you name it. Order what you want, fill out some questions, and get it shipped straight to you. Skip having to lay out all your medical issues in the clinic waiting room and keep your private business private. Free shipping and easy prescriptions. Boost your game and do it all from the privacy of your own home at www.jack.health. Okay, Sean, now that we've had our hair, skin, sexual health, etc. looked after, what should the Raptors be looking after for themselves in this offseason?
It's interesting, man, because like I've made this point on my own show, but I'm really, really excited for a low-key offseason where all we have to worry about is mid-level exception signings, right? You think last summer it's is Kyle Lowry, the best player in franchise history, going to be gone, or is he coming back? Year before that, Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, sort of like watching Giannis and was he going to sign the Supermax, the will he, won't he, all that stuff that people were worried about with the cap space in 2021 that was supposed to be the big thing. That was stressful. You go back the year before that, literally Kawhi Leonard leaves and like completely takes a window of contention off the table. Year before that, they trade DeMar DeRozan. Year before that, they have Kyle Lowry flirting with the Spurs and the Wolves before he comes back. Like, give me a low-key chill off season where I can, get excited about a $10 million signing that doesn't change the world for me. And like, I'm very, very content. The offseason's fun to talk about for sure, but with this Raptors team in particular, it's kind of like the idea of, marinating a hunk of meat that you're going to cook and then taking it out too soon. And then like the flavors haven't properly absorbed. I really hope they don't do that and like start shipping off pieces in the interest of, trades just for the sake of trades. And I don't think the Raptors front office is the type of group that will do that. They're very committed to the flavor profile of their basketball team. So I expect we'll see a pretty low key off season. I expect we're going to see like most of the guys back. I think a bit of a sort of change in the way that the team hierarchy is set up and the sort of dynamics and who plays with whom and who's coming off the bench. I think that's probably in store. But as far as the offseason, what's exciting to me is to think about the core that we just enjoyed so much watching win 48 games is more or less going to be back and intact. And I think that's cool. And, there's something to be said for a big uproarious offseason where lots of things happen. But I think you have to be in the right space as a team to really want to be part of that. And like they were, for example, when they traded for Kawhi, that team had kind of reached the point where something had to happen to shake things up. Whereas this one is so early in its curve that I think you just leave well enough alone for the most part and then go try to sign DeLon Wright. And and I'm a happy camper. So like as much as there's nothing to get happy or excited about, like nothing fun technically to go down, I think that on its own is fun. There's something to be said for just sitting on the beach and not doing anything.
Your description of like the Raptors is like leaning into their flavor profile. Really, really great. Painting really great pictures with words. I'll say that much. But is there a part of you that wonders because you expect a quiet summer that it could be bombastic?
Oh, sure. They could go trade for Rudy Gobert and I wouldn't be stunned. Like there's a framework there. I don't know if I want it to happen. The DeAndre Ayton stuff is out there too, I suppose. And I'm not even sure who I'd prefer between the two. But yeah, like 100% something crazy could happen. Because look, it's Masai and Bobby. Those guys, if opportunity strikes, they're going to say, well, we have all of our picks except for this year's in the coffers. We've got a couple interesting young players, and we have all of these very good players on very reasonable and easy to move contracts. Like I've said all along, it seems like they're setting this team up for the next big strike at a star because of the contracts they have in tow. But I don't really think Gobert or Ayton is kind of like the guy you go and spend those chips on, if that makes sense. Like I think you got to like, there's always going to be some other disgruntled star that comes along after another round of playoff flameouts next year. And for the most part, they'll have all those contracts on hand and, a little bit more in terms of knowledge of who they want to keep around long term. So could happen. Wouldn't be totally stunned, but I'm banking on it being a little bit more chill just because that doesn't really feel to me like Masai is so about winning and so about like, he's just so hell-bent on winning the championship that I think he's already seen the blueprint, right? And patience is what got him to the point where he was in the spot where he could strike with a really good team already on hand to go get Kawhi. And I just feel like trading for Rudy Gobert right now feels like a Colangelo-ass move and sort of like a half measure that's going to cap you out at some certain level. And it's harder to say, right? Because Scotty Barnes is Scotty Barnes, and maybe his growth, whoever's around him, it's not going to matter. They're going to be a championship contender in 5 years anyway. But I do think it seems like a deal that, you know, a more desperate flailing GM would make, as opposed to one who is pretty confident and comfortable in the sort of team building model he's set up and the guys he already has on hand and the time those guys have, right? Like, sure, Pascal and Fred are on, you know, shorter contracts, and, you know, that'll be something they have to reckon with maybe this offseason, but like when it comes to extensions and stuff. But I think, you know, when you have Scotty Barnes, who's 20 years old, and Precious Achua he's 22 and he's in year 3 next year of his rookie deal, and you have all these guys who are, you know, really exciting and sort of still early in this germination process, I don't see that being a huge swing that Masai is going to go make, because it's not at the sort of inflection point where it's like do something or, you know, watch the downturn kind of take over.
That brings up a really interesting ask of Masai, because Masai has been unpredictable. Like he was slow and building with the Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan version of the Raptors. He famously said he wanted to give those guys a platform, and said a similar, you know, expressed similar sentiments to Pascal and Fred. But these teams, when we look at the makeup of like signing a guy like DeMar Carroll, who had no shot at an all-star team, but that was like 16 million a year when the cap went up, and it was a really big deal. And they had guys like Patrick Patterson, and they were drafting Pirtle and Siakam and OG, and just hitting on every type of pick. They were like, they had lottery picks in like Pirtle, and they had the really, you know, the sexy blogger pick in OG Anunoby, and then emerging Pascal Siakam, and then they had their all-stars. These are the types of hits that you don't expect them to make again, and the type of hits that, quite frankly, Malachi Flynn, Delano Banton, and David Johnson don't look like they're going to bring that back end. Norman Powell, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet. Sure. That title team before they trade for Kawhi, the dearth of talent is just like crazy. It's so heavy. And this team, it's just really interesting because you have Pascal and Fred, and right there you have an all NBA, and presumably, you know, with Fred healthy, an all-star level guy. And the most interesting thing that could happen is OG, an all-star leap. Maybe it's in the cards, maybe it isn't. You know, it's possible. I'll say that much. I can see it more than I could see it with DeMar Carroll, for example.
Sure.
Or Norman Powell or whatever, or Gary Trent Jr., right? And they have Precious and Scotty on rookie scale contracts. And I think for a lot of people, the conventional wisdom is that if the Raptors are going to be a championship team in the next few years, it comes when Scotty hits, hopefully, all-star level on a rookie scale contract. And then just by proxy of that, combining all-star with all-NBA with all-star, and then hopefully they're in the luxury tax, they're paying guys like OG, Precious is still on rookie scale. You're looking at maybe 2 all-defense guys, plus whatever they're giving on offense, to kind of round that out. And on paper, just in your head, if you're playing the optimist game, that they get their A, and, you know, once they are there, that seems to put you in the championship conversation, just that glut of players. And I'm wondering, we can be cute about storylines. Are you on the optimist storyline? Are you in the middler storyline or a pessimist storyline? Like, how do you view Pascal's first season in a little while or first off season in a little while where he gets to work on his game?
Yeah.
Fred coming back healthy, Scotty's jump, OG maybe working on stuff, Precious. Like, how do you view the future as far as the internal growth aspect?
I mean, I'm really excited about it. I'd probably not like the peak optimist level, because I think that's a lot to put onto a 20-year-old. And, you know, look, we've seen plenty of dudes in recent years get drafted high and then be all-stars and sort of franchise-changing dudes within a couple of years, like Ja Morant's in year 3, Luka Doncic is in what, year 4? That they're like, it happens, right? And so I could totally see a world in which Scotty Barnes is an all-star next season. I don't know if I would bank on it, but I think it's, in the realm of possibility that he averages, 21 with, 8 boards and 5 assists, kind of maybe like a lighter version of Pascal's season. I could totally see that take place. Again, you don't want to put too much on a guy because he still has some limitations offensively. I think his defense is going to come around. He's just too smart and too quick at learning on that end to be a negative for too long. But yeah, when it comes to the overall vision of the team, like, the depth parts will have to be figured in. And I think I have some hope that like a Banton can be like a deeper bench type guy. I don't know if he's going to ever emerge into like a starter or anything like that, but I think he certainly kind of fits the vision in one way or another. Uh-oh, we've lost Samson. Hey,
Hey.
there you go.
There you
I've
go.
kept the recording going. I've not set anything on fire. I think we're all good.
You're really valuable, like your most valuable player. Kept it live. Okay. This basically, for me, cut out. Do you remember when I cut out? Roughly like.
So I kept talking. You were frozen for a good while I was talking.
Yeah.
You're frozen again. And I went like probably a minute because I was like, maybe he's gonna come back. I'll just keep going, and then you totally dropped off. So I can just restart from where you threw it to me.
Okay.
My optimism
that
on
sounds
the 3 levels of
Yeah.
optimism. Yeah.
Yeah, we can do choose
Cool.
any level of optimism that you like.
Cool. All right. I'll there we go. Yeah, I think for me, I'm kind of in between like the middle level of optimism and the peak level of optimism. Like, it's a lot to put on a 20-year-old dude to expect him to become like a franchise centering, star player, right? Like, it's a lot. There's still some things for Scotty Barnes to figure out. His offense is not 100% complete, of course. He's an incredible just guy who can go to the bucket and score from whatever spot he wants. That's a huge thing to have on hand. But like, the 3-point shot probably needs to come on along a little bit. The pull up game for the mid range and sort of the extra stuff that you need a star to do. But I think there's a world in which he could be an all-star next season. Like, I don't want to put a cap on that dude because he's incredible. Like, does he have like a sort of Siakam light type season in him where he goes for 21, 8, and 5? I think that's totally on the table for next season. Like, it's not that far, in terms of, a place you want to take your ambition. I think it's interesting. I'm really curious to see if they go and extend Fred and Pascal, because I think that will tell us a lot about what they think about what Scotty can be within this core of the team. And I hope they extend those guys back to the marination thing. Like, I think just giving this a little bit more runway to cook, I think is a good call. But, I have a vision of the team, and it seems to be what their vision is too, of sort of dueling heads of the snake, kind of binary stars, if you will, in Scotty and Pascal. Maybe at some point Scotty, passes by Pascal and becomes the clear number one. But I think going into next season, I'd like to see those two guys as like the primary initiators, see what you can do with them, see how, Scotty's playmaking in the half court has come along, and, have the roving around those binary stars of the planets who knock down 40% of their threes in Fred and Gary Trent and OG and maybe Precious. I think there's an obvious sort of pathway here to this team becoming very good. And I also think with the way the league is set up right now, with the cap crunch that's come in, where you're not seeing teams kind of just have a ton of cap space, we're not seeing like that much in the way of stars picking out destinations these days. Most teams are kind of like 1-star operations, 2-star operations at most. There's totally a pathway for the Raptors to throw themselves into that mix. Like, I don't think the Miami Heat are the greatest team I've ever seen. They're in the conference finals. They're very good, but I don't think it's crazy to suggest the Raptors could be on that level within a year or two. Like, it's as good as the Eastern Conference is. And look, we might be living in a world where the goddamn Celtics are just like our overlords for the next 8 years, and that sucks. But as good as the East is, I think there's just a pathway to kind of being part of that top upper crust set of teams, and they almost got there this season, right? Like, I think full health against the Sixers, they can win that series. Joel Embiid doesn't hit a 3 in game 3 to win it. Like, there's a very real world in which the Raptors make it to the second round and take on a busted Heat team with no Kyle Lowry, and who knows what happens there. So yeah, I think it's pretty okay to be optimistic about the track this team can be on. I wouldn't go into next season expecting a conference finals or anything like that, but with the way Scotty seems to just kind of absorb things and learn and get better with everything he does, I'm pretty bullish on where this team can be in 2-3 years. And we've seen it, man. John Morant in year 3, he's incredible. Same with Luka. Same with all these guys who just seem to have come into the league recently and have gotten awesome real quick. Like, that's becoming a more recurring trend. And so I wonder if my own sort of hesitance to put too much onto Scotty Barnes is in some way sort of shaping the way I'm viewing him and maybe lowering what I should be on him, right? Maybe I should be here saying and bloviating and being like, Scotty Barnes is going to be an all NBA player next season. That seems like a lot. Again, he's 20 years old, but he's shown a pretty great capacity for being awesome. And you give him a little bit more rope, you give him more sort of agency over how the offense runs. And I do think there's sort of a pathway there to build your team around. And then you wrote the definitive piece on this, right? Siakam and Barnes is the 2-star duo. That's a thing now. I think the Raptors are going to commit themselves to that. And you could do a lot worse in terms of guys to hitch your wagon to than 2 guys of that skill level. I mean, we're seeing it with Boston. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, you surround them with just effective role players and guys who can hit threes. That's a pretty damn dangerous recipe. You do the same thing with a healthy Clippers team. You get a couple of dudes 6'8" to 6'10" who can handle the ball and score and surround them with good players. That's kind of the recipe for very good basketball in today's NBA. And the Raptors seem to be kind of on that track. Maybe it's not next year where they really kind of hit high gear, but I don't think it's super far off.
I think that's a great point you make about, what the team wants to do. And I think, and especially like how simple it is once, well, not simple, but you can have a clear vision of how you want to build a team once you have those guys in tow. Like Miami has a very clear vision despite not having an MVP level player. And the Raptors, like, as great as I think Pascal is, the jump from where he is now to MVP is just like, it's as big a jump as the jump from rookie season to now. It's
Sure.
incredible to get to that level of play. I don't think that's in the cards. And as you said, like, putting weight on Scotty, not just say like, oh, maybe like a rookie contract all-star, but say this guy's an MVP in 3. Like, yeah, I wouldn't do that either.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's reminiscent of, what was it? I think there's that video, right, where Scotty was in Florida and a fan asked him if he was going to stay stay in Toronto, which is so funny. His first year of his rookie contract.
What are your plans for 2028, Scotty? I demand to know.
Yeah. But it's really important this year that, you can look objectively, and I will only care about cap stuff when it means a player is getting underpaid. If a player is getting
Yep.
overpaid, I'm like, dude, don't talk to me about numbers, you nerd, get lost. But when a guy's
My
getting
cap philosophy is they'll figure it out. Like their
yeah,
whole job, the whole job description of the front office is to figure that shit out. I do not worry myself with that stuff.
yeah. Except when I perceive a player as being underpaid, then
Mhm.
I'm a cap expert. Then I'm like, wow, this guy, he's so valuable. He's on this contract, like he's the proletariat, anything like that, right? And
Mhm.
OG and Fred, objectively, for the type of impact they bring, are underpaid. And
Yeah.
Pascal this year has ascended to a place where extension, stay on this contract like 35 or 36 million next season. I think everybody's okay with that because
Yeah.
that's what you pay a player of his quality. Like nobody in Milwaukee cares that Drew Holiday is on a max contract because you can win a chip with Drew Holiday as one of your three best players. And
Mhm.
most teams win a chip with three max players on it. That's typically the way it works out. And
Yeah.
so Pascal is good enough for that. How much better he gets to where maybe we say like, oh yeah, he's underpaid. I'd love to be on that train. But the team has found things that work and they have this burgeoning star rookie. And that's a super fun place to be. It's where Memphis, was before they made their leap. It's where, the Celtics were for a million years before it all finally came together. And it's like,
Mhm.
that's a really fun place to be because optimism is the crack
Yeah.
of like, and let's assume crack is good in this circumstance. Like, it's the crack of like fandom, right? It's like to dream of something bigger because
Mhm.
only one team can win the full vision of like, hey, we're the champions every year. 29 other fan bases have to have something. And the
Yeah.
fact that the Raptors have this like linear progression attached to Scotty Barnes' rising star, regardless of whatever else happens, is probably the coolest offseason storyline of all. And who knows what he comes back as? After
Yeah.
his first NBA offseason, he's grinding, Sigma grind set like Jimmy Butler. Who knows? He's in the gym putting in work.
Yeah, and like feelings of optimism are not all equal, right? Like there's a difference between like, oh man, Scotty Barnes could be the dude who leads this team to be like a perennial title contender versus being like, oh, Charlie Villanueva, second in rookie of the year voting, baby. He's on the way. Like there's different types of guys to dream on. And I think Scotty Barnes is the right type of guy to dream on. And yeah, maybe Pascal never makes that leap into being, a top 8 player or whatever, however we want to define these things, not to get all Bill Simmonsy about it, but like maybe he never does that, the really difficult leap you're talking about, but that's all right. Scotty Barnes is there. Maybe he can, and he might not. That's also fine too. They're going to be a good team, I think, regardless. And, if it turns out that Scotty and Pascal reveal themselves to be the best second and third options on a great team, then obviously you have other ways you got to try to figure that out. But, for now, there's no need to worry about that because we've yet to see what the limitations of Scotty Barnes are. We probably won't see what the cap on Scotty Barnes is for 5-6 years because these guys continue to add and grow and, adapt and learn after seeing what defenses want to do to them, taking a summer to incorporate all that information into what they're doing the next year. And I don't know about you, but Scotty to me seems like the type of dude who's going to be a little bit hell bent on this type of thing and taking what went wrong and applying it. Like, would anybody be shocked? Would you be shocked if he came back like a 36% shooter next year just because he was pissed he missed all those threes in the last game? I wouldn't be stunned. Like he seems like he's wired that kind of way, and you can't quantify it. It's hard to predict. There's no number you can say like, oh, well, that's predicting he's going to become this. But when you listen to the dude talk and you listen to people talk about him, he seems like the kind of guy that's worth kind of throwing your chips in. Not to throw any shade at Charlie Villanueva. I'm sorry, but
Where
one of the
were
great
you?
rookies in Raptors history. But yeah, it's a different ball game when Scotty Barnes is the guy you're dreaming on.
Where were you when Charlie scored 46 in his rookie
God,
season?
I'm pretty sure I was at like this what was that? 2005 his rookie season? 05, 06?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at Raptor Ball. I don't know if you know what Raptor Ball is. It's like a camp where I went like once a week. They taught you how to play basketball. I was like better than
They were
everyone
grooming
there.
you.
It
It's
was,
like the
it was
Barcelona kids club.
yeah,
Yeah, they wanted you on the
exactly.
team.
Yeah. It was like the one time where I was better than everybody there at playing on a basketball court because I signed up for a division that was way too easy for me because I had played a little bit of basketball. And so I was just like, everyone's like, "Wow, you're great," and I was like, "This is the peak of my athletic career. This is awesome." But I remember coming home from a day at Raptor Ball to the news that Charlie V had gone off for 48. That was a very standout memory for me. The other one I remember coming home, it was the last game, I think, of the season before they drafted Charlie V. And it was Omar Cook was putting up 19 points in the final game of the season. And I was like, that's the guy. Also, Scotty Barnes, Omar Cook, not made the same as guys you dream on either.
That's right. Optimism comes in different shapes and forms. But so do podcasts. This usually goes an hour, but between 50 and 55 minutes feels like a good spot to say goodbye to y'all. But, Sean, thank you so much for coming on. The floor's yours to plug away, sell your wares,
Yeah. Locked on Raptors is a daily podcast. We're staying daily through the end of free agency. So you got lots of stuff to look forward to. I'm sure I'll, harangue you into coming back on the podcast at some point. But yeah, every day, Monday to Friday, got 30-minute episodes talking about all sorts of random stuff. Next week is going to be a lot of fun. Actually, we have our annual over-unders spectacular with Vivek Jacob and Sahal Abdi, where before the season, we do a lot of big over-unders and we make our predictions. At the end of the year, we take it all up, see who won. And once the All-NBA awards are out, we'll be able to finally, in full, look at the over-unders and see who won. I got a season trivia episode as well with a couple of Raptors Republic people, Freddie Rivas and Catherine Niker from Buckets and Tea and Confederacy of Dunks. They're popping on Tuesday. We're going to do a quiz on the 2021-22 Raptors, so that'll be a good time. And then, just regular offseason stuff. And then if you are a fan of the Canadian Elite Basketball League or you want to become one, I host a weekly show called CEBL Weekly that airs on Wednesdays on the mobile app and on YouTube and on CEBL Plus. And also, I'll be calling about a dozen games of play-by-play over the course of the summer as well. My first two games are next Thursday and Friday. First one is J. Cole's pro debut, or I guess it's not a pro debut, his CEBL debut with Scarborough playing in Guelph. So you can watch those on CBC Gem, on the CEBL app, and all that stuff. They're all free too.
Hell yeah. That's a really good plug.
Why, thank you.
Pretty good. Yeah.
I usually am just like, follow my Twitter. But no, there's actually stuff to plug now. So yeah, go and subscribe and do all the good stuff.
It's like a good beefy plug. There's a lot of good stuff in there. It's like it's detailed, and you're like, oh, by the way, the J. Cole thing, in case you forgot from the start, I'm calling this game. It's pretty good. Sean, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Anytime, man. Always happy to chat.
Okay. And listener, viewer, thanks for tuning in. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.